Well, g'day everyone and welcome back to the channel. Alright, today I'm showing how to make copper and brass bolsters. And the first step of that is to cut a piece off. Now, I generally use probably about 1.25 inches, about 30 mil of material for each bolster. So just cutting a bunch off so I can set them up to drill. Now, I'll normally use the bandsaw for this. It is a cold cut, so it's the easiest way to do it. Whereas using a grinder or something like that tends to be a hot cut. Doing it on the bandsaw generally tends to be a colder cut. It does heat the metal up a bit, but it's not the same as using a grinder to do it. Okay, over to the drill press. Got the vise out of position here just so I can show you. Generally get the back line of where I want the bolster to finish in place. Get the top not quite flush but close to. And then we just need to adjust everything in place and drill down our first hole. Okay, once we've got the hole marked in place, the blade drill on, then I'll drill it through with the blade off. Okay, so we'll put the two pieces of bolster material together into the vise. Just flush them up and lock it in place. And that way we can take the hole from the first piece down into the second piece. It just keeps everything in a nice tight line. And it will mean that it's all going to match up evenly later on. From there, I just measure a piece of pin material. Now, I generally use 1/8 or 3.18 millimeters for those who want to get all technical for my pins. So I'll just cut off a piece of pin at the right length. Just hold it so it doesn't flip away. And then I will cut a second one ready for the next piece. After that, I'm just going to chamfer the end of them, just so it makes it that little bit easier to get it into the holes. Okay, back on we go with the blade over the top of the bolster. Then we'll just drop one of the chamfered pins in. You see the chamfer on the end of it. Just drop that straight through that hole and that'll hold it all in place. And that way we can drill hole number 2 while hole number 1's held perfectly in place. Okay, next up we're going to put that blade back over. We're going to put the pin through the first hole. That'll hold everything in place. And we're going to start doing that. The second hole, with that pin there, it holds everything perfectly in place. And I know it's going to work out just fine for when we come to join it all together. Now, while the drilling on the brass is fairly easy, drilling on copper is an absolute pain in the butt. The copper's a lot more grabby. It'll grab the drill bit a lot easier, and it doesn't want to let it cut through so well. Even though it's a little softer than the brass, it'll hold on to it. And word for the wise, do not use $120 carbide bit on this, because it will grab hold of it and snap it. Some people learn that lesson the hard way. Okay, next up we're coming over to the belt grinder. We're going to put the bolsters in place, so they're where they're going to be on the finished knife, and we just want to trim off any excess material. You don't want to go right up to the handle, especially if there's any looseness in between the holes and the bolster. And don't worry about any looseness, because you can fix that down the track. So if the pins have got a little wobble in them, don't go right up to the blade, because you're going to end up overcutting. So we're just trying to get it a little closer and get the line similar to what the knife's got. Okay, once we've done the back of the blade, then we're going to do that front section, and this is really just hogging out material. Just sitting there, 40 grit belt on, reasonably new belt with lots of grit on it, and we're just cutting and cutting and cutting and just getting that brass out of the way. I could probably get away with using smaller pieces, but I prefer to have enough that I've got room to craft it later on to get the shape I'm after. So yeah, I prefer to have that little bit wider piece, and that gives me a bit more flexibility to play with. Brass and copper, it's it's not super expensive, and yeah, like I said, just prefer to have enough there that I can craft it later. Looking on the underside there, you can see that some of the steel's flush with the brass, and that works perfectly. Yeah, as long as you don't have too much wiggle there, it'll work perfectly. So we're just gonna pull those pins out, take the knife away, and then just work on the two bolsters together. Okay, so this phase here, this is the artist part. This is the part where you're making that bolster fit the shape that you want for that knife. So as you can see, I'm trimming a little bit off the bottom, and then we'll start working some curves into it. Not all of my knives have got exactly the same looking bolster. I don't want them to have that. I like each knife to look individual, so I will grind each set of bolsters to match the shape of the knife that I'm making. I won't go off a preconceived concept. I'll just start grinding, looking at the knife, looking at the bolsters, and working out what I want to have. So each one will get a fresh shape for each build. You know, to me, a custom knife, it needs to be a little bit different on each one. As you can see, we're starting to get that round nose on it that I like. And coming in a shape beautifully. Okay, next up I'm using an angle adjustable tool rest. Now this tool rest is set somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees, which is the angle I like on the front of the bolster. So we just put it up to there, and we're following the same curve around that we put in. We'll follow around and just cutting that angle down to the join line. So just gentle pressure, having a look each time and seeing how much we ground away, how much more we need to grind away. Because this is a delicate part of the process. And as you can see there, one side's ground down and we're a little bit over, but that's fine. We'll tidy it up with the other side. So just going to pop the pins out, put them over the other side so that way the other side's flat against the grinder, and then just follow the exact same process on the other side. And there you have it, the two angles now join in the center of the metal. Okay, I tend to skip a lot of grits when grinding soft metals like copper or brass. So we're going straight from a 40 grit up to a 240 grit, and it's easy for the 240 grit to clean it up. So we're just cutting down on the 240, just a couple passes, just along the same lines. Next up we're up to the 400 grit, exact same process, just refining the scratches, making it that little bit neater. And the last grind is on a 600 grit cork belt, just to give it all a smooth final finish. That's the same level as I finished the blade to, so I like the nose of the bolster to finish at that 600. And there you can see, all polished up and looking pretty. So that is ready to get a fasten to the knife. We are good to go. Now again, working in the copper is much the same process as working in the brass. The difference at this stage is copper is a bigger heat sink. It will suck up the heat from the belt grinding on it very, very quickly. And you need to quench it often. You don't want it overheating and heating the blade up and then pulling some of the temper out of the blade. It also burns your fingers rather quickly. Alright folks, here we are at the last stages of doing the bolsters. Now I've got to put the pins in and pin them over. These pins are drawn, so a piece of either copper or brass is pulled through a machine and it's drawn out, in which case it work hardens it. So if you try and pin them just straight as you cut them, then they'll tend to shatter. So what you got to do, get a bit of flame and just heat them up. Now I'm just taking them to a dull red colour, and that will be enough to release the particles in them and make them softer. Now, as I've explained earlier in my grinding video, when I grind chestnuts, I grind them with a convex bevel on them, which means I do have a bit of a curve up here. So when the bolster goes on, it can tend to have a small gap in it. I mean, it's only 1,000 or something like that. It's a tiny gap, but you know, I don't want to leave gaps in the work. So I do put a bit of glue under the bolster. It's not to hold the bolster on. It's purely just to fill that gap up. So just going to give everything a quick spray with some rubbing alcohol and wipe it off, just so anything from when I've been working is cleaned up. So I go through and clean these. It's just a small amount of glue that I need. It's pretty much just on the edges, but I will spread it over it. So as you can see, that would be not enough glue if you're looking to glue fix it. But for what I'm doing, it's perfect. Ideally, I actually don't want it on the pins. So I just put pins in place. Again, that little bit of glue just on the back side. Try and keep it out of the pinhole because that's not where I want it. Now this will squeeze out as I come down, and that's exactly what I'm wanting. So that's just a matter of cleaning that up once we're all together. Alright, so just press everything in place. Want to get those pins so they're halfway through. Okay, there we go. Now, nice firm blows. And all we're doing is squishing the pin. And as it goes down, it'll squeeze out sideways. So there we go. As I said, we've got that tiny little bit of glue, squeeze it out there. Right. Which you may not be able to see on the camera, but that'll fill the tiny bit of gap that I've got. And that is perfect. All right, so as you can see, the pins are now gone down and they've also expanded out. They've also expanded out within the hole. So we now have a mechanical fit. The brass is expanded out and the brass isn't gonna come out. It works exactly the same with copper. The only way you can get it off is to cut that brass. So, yeah, there we are. Now I'll clean these up when I do the handles. Just grind them back. It's still expanded in the hole. Some people do a tapered hole. I've found a straight hole just works fine for me. So there we go. That is how we make and attach a brass bolster. All right, thank you very much everyone for watching, and bye for now.